Muy buenas tardes, tengan todos y todas ustedes. Es un placer para mí tener la oportunidad de estar en esta conferencia Metrópolis 2019. Quisiera comenzar por agradecer de manera muy especial al Gobierno de Canadá el haberme invitado a esta sesión y también expresar mi gratitud a Enrique del Castelo, quien tuvo la confianza en proponerme para esta gran responsabilidad. Quiero agradecer también a los que me acompañan en el panel, todos distinguidos expertos en el tema de la migración, y decirles que me da sobre todo un enorme orgullo que en medio de circunstancias muy complicadas vengo a representar a mi país. Quisiera empezar por decirles que mi exposición será muy breve. La voy a hacer en inglés. I will turn into English, although my text in English is going to emerge quite frequently. And I will begin by saying some context and facts regarding the situation we face in Mexico. First of all, you need to understand that Mexico has not seen itself as a receiving country. We always were working on Mexico as an emigration, basically to the United States. And what is happening right now is truly making us see each other in a mirror. So first of all, you need to see that the former Mexican government started to establish migratory controls in the southern part of Mexico during the presidency of Enrique Peña Nieto, which, by the way, ended up in November last year. You see in the map all the network of migratory controls basically in the southern part of Mexico. He was absolutely against the Central American caravans, basically coming from the Northern Triangle. And he said that he was not willing to welcome all these people without the proper documentation. Let us not forget that unfortunately Mexico has been trapped along this situation with the debate that emerged in the United States when Donald Trump wanted Mexico to pay for the wall. So President Trump has been threatened not only Mexico, but his peers from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, in terms of imposing economic sanctions if we do not behave well in terms of controlling human mobility in the region. We had a shift from the former government when Andrés Manuel López Obrador came into the presidency on the 1st of December 2018, because during his campaign he mentioned that he was absolutely in favor of an open doors policy with full protection of human rights. So the first day of his presidency, when the same day he took office, he had all this ceremony with El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, and ECLAC, a representative by Ambassador Bárcena, for signing the agreement to launch the comprehensive development plan for the region, the Northern Triangle plus Mexico. What has happened is that when this was already happening, the number of undocumented Central Americans, with some others, not only Central Americans, transiting into Mexico had already made it, some of them to the northern border, and they were packing up in towns along the US border. And by January 2019, the Department of Homeland Security implemented the Remain in Mexico policy for citizens and nationals of countries other than Mexico arriving in the US by land from Mexico illegally or without paper documentation. So they were sending them all back to remain in northern border cities of my country. By mid-June, the Secretary of International Affairs in Mexico mentioned that around 25,000 irregular migrants were waiting in Mexican towns along the border with the US these people were expecting the final decision from the United States to let them or not let them in. This is a picture of one of the caravans coming into the southern border. You can see the human dimension. You need to recognize that Mexican authorities have been doing a great effort in order to establish 58 migratory stations and provisional shelters in 23 out of the 32 states in my country. The Mexican Ministry of the Interior has mentioned that the country has registered more than 53,000 irregular migrants coming with the caravans, plus more than 37,000 deportations. This is a picture where you can see very clearly the overcrowding of the facilities we have basically in the southern border, but also in the northern border. It is quite interesting to recognize how difficult that Mexico has always had difficulties in terms of having proven data for many things, not only for migration, but this is now the case. Because if we compare the numbers I just gave you with the data that DHS has regarding the number of apprehensions in the fiscal year 2019, that runs from October 2018 to May 2019, there has been almost 600,000 apprehensions in the US-Mexico border. Out of this number, there is an increasing number of unaccompanied children, that it is almost 57,000 out of the whole number. Just compare the number that we have from October 18 to May 19. If you compare the fiscal year 2018 in the United States, the total number for the whole year, it didn't make it 400,000 apprehensions in the US border. Well, unfortunately, this is the world we live in. We had a president that decided to shift his approach in April. We don't know if this was because already there was a lot of growing discontent in my country, but also an increasing pressure from the United States. I was in the US-Mexico border when he was threatening to close the border, and there were all these complaints of commercial goods not being able to move. But one of the issues that didn't come out specifically in international media was the discontent and the anger of many Mexicans that live in the Mexico side of the border that have a legal permit and visa to cross every day. They either work or study in places such as El Paso, and they were truly very mad because of this situation created by the members of the caravans. So this has been having an impact in terms of shifting and rebuilding the social imaginary in my country towards migrants. So we have implemented 2 different cards to try to register the newcomers in the caravans. I'm not just going to focus in the second one because it's the one that is implemented. The first one was when the president said we want an open doors policy, but this is now in the past. This is called the Regional Visitor Card. It was originally designed for nationals from Belize and Guatemala, but this has been extended for nationals from Hondurans and Salvadorians. It's only for 5 years. It allows them just to transit within the scope of the map where you see all the migration controls. That means the southern part of Mexico. They want to keep them in that region between Campeche, Chiapas, Tabasco, Quintana Roo, and Yucatan. It's not a working permit. The other image I want to show you is that Mexico has had a very restrictive policy towards refugees. This is what has happened, but no matter that, you see that the number of applications have been growing steadily. If you see 2017 to 2018, it's more than double the submission of applications. Where are they coming from, the people that are requesting refugee in Mexico? Well, from Honduras is the #1, El Salvador the second, Venezuela the third. But if you see the numbers, for example, Honduras, there were more than 25,000 applications and only less than 5,000 accepted. In the case of El Salvador, 1/3 of the applications were accepted, and it is interesting. It was so interesting for me to realize that Nicaragua, for a very peculiar situation, you see that the number of applications is almost the same as the one of that were accepted. So turning rapidly, this is exactly the same. I'm not going to talk about the deportations from Mexico and the US to Central America, just to let you know, not to forget, that Mexico is the winner in terms of the number of deportees back to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras since the year 2015. So talking about the proposal of ICLAC, between El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, which is a comprehensive development plan developed by ICLAC. We need an estimated $10 billion per year. We don't know where is this money going to come from, still in the making, and contains 30 public policy recommendations and 4 key pillars. I'm not going to talk about the wage. Well, anyway, these 4 key pillars. One is economic development. It highlights taxation and investment, integration of trade, energy, and logistics, social programs including health, education, and employment, environmental sustainability, and integrated management of the migratory cycle. It also incorporates macroeconomics, progressive taxation, strengthened tax administration, transparency, and accountability among them. Which is also very relevant to highlight in terms of this comprehensive development plan for the region, is that it incorporates as a key, the key component is migration management. One, human rights of migrants and refugees at the center of the migratory cycle. The second, principle of non-discrimination in the migratory cycle. 3, care of people displaced by violence and natural disaster. Let us keep in mind why the people from Central America and the southern part of Mexico are moving out of their places. It is because of poverty, it is because of violence, but it is because of corruption and the strengthening of the human traffickers networks in that area. And another element that crosses around this crisis is politics. I don't have time to let you know the stories about what has happened, but changes of government in Mexico and in El Salvador and in Guatemala has coincided. So this initiative is quite innovative. It establishes development space comprising El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. And it does integrate human mobility into a fair and sustainable development. We need to be very careful that all these people who are really moving know their rights and do coincide with this proposal. I think we should be asking them how do they see their own future and the future of their children. So in order to finish, and let me just mention that this is exactly the best, the way to represent the US-Mexico border, not with bricks, but built up with dollars. And the US-Mexico agreement now, which I call it is an unprecedented one because we are still asymmetrical, we live in an asymmetrical interdependence environment. We don't know if we are friends, partners, allies, lovers, allies, or always distant neighbors. Maybe we are all of that at the same time. So as a part of the agreement, Mexico has agreed to deploy thousands of National Guard members in our southern border with Guatemala in an attempt to reduce the number of migrants headed to the United States-Mexico border. Mexico has committed to taking action to dismantle illicit organizations and networks in our southern border, and also has agreed to take in more migrants seeking asylum in the United States while they await the adjudication of their claims. These measures will be evaluated only after 45 days. I think we are running out of time. I've been speaking for the last month about this. In 45 days, Mexico and the US will continue to discuss the terms of this agreement to ensure that the expected results are met, and an announcement on further actions will be made within 90 days. Tariffs still are on the table and could be imposed if the levels of migration are not reduced. To finish, let me just mention, I don't know what happened with my slides anyway. To finish with my presentation, let me just tell you that beyond this wall, Mexico and the US do more than $611 billion trade annually. Imposing tariffs, from my perspective, to certify good performance in border control against irregular migrants could end up having unintended consequences, increasing tensions within Mexico, more violence from gangs and human traffickers, etc. Just last week, by June the 18th, Televisa Network reported that the Mexican National Guard had deployed 1,300 troops in Chiapas. They immediately detained migrants that were unable to demonstrate their legal status in Mexico, and they are requesting Mexicans to show them our voters card. We do not call it ID card, it's the voting card. And if we Mexicans do not have the voting card, they would not allow us even to take a bus from Chiapas to Oaxaca, for example. So, at the end of this tragedy, it's a human tragedy, let me just tell you that I'm very worried about the forging, as I said before, the forging of a new imaginary in Mexico that is already working against irregular migrants. The role of mass media and social media are absolutely decisive in this crisis, as they are framing the conversation. By the way, just some days ago, some journalists were saying that they think that maybe a political party will emerge in Mexico that will propose xenophobic policies. As I must say that policy improvisation is absolutely unacceptable, and that Mexico is in great need of advice and support to overcome this already humanitarian crisis. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.